Blog Talk Radio.
Well, folks, welcome to one more edition of Politics Done Right. I am Egberto Willies, your host. Please, or I should say thank you very much for being with me one more Saturday at noon Central Standard, at 1 Eastern and 10 Pacific, and for those in the Mountain States, at 11. Anyhow, what are we going to talk about today? Today we're going to talk about the traditional media's midterm narrative falling apart. But before I get into that, I want to just make mention about the veteran fiasco, the veteran administration scandal that is taking place this week and probably for the next several weeks. This is not a new scandal, folks. There's nothing new here. We have been mistreating our veterans for a very, very long time. And I tell you something, I learned quite a bit this week. And I learned this not from the traditional media. I actually learned it from the Comedy Channel. Amazing that some of the best information that we're getting out there to refresh us on our history is not coming from the mainstream. It's coming from other sources, websites and otherwise. So this week, it's interesting because this week, two of my blog posts actually featured Jon Stewart. And one may ask, why are you doing that? The guy is a comedian, he's a satirist. Well, you know what I learned this week? This week I learned that, and we all had history. I even got American history back when I lived in Panama. In Panama, all the other countries of the world, believe it or not, they learn their own history, and then they learn quite a bit about American history, and that was no different in Panama. We learned the history and the Panamanian history, but then again, because of the dominance of the United States throughout the world, I can tell you, most people from around the world know quite a bit of American history, had to learn a lot of history, and in Panama it was no different. Anyhow, I didn't know about things like soldiers back during during 1783 themselves had to fight the powers that be to be taken care of, to be paid. The Continental Congress. It is amazing. And where did I learn that this week? Through the Comedy Channel. But here's the deal. The Comedy Channel highlights issues, right? They highlight issues, and Jon Stewart, what I like with his research department is that they throw you back to a whole lot of these things, these occurrences in history, but these occurrences in history need more investigation. So when I listen to Jon Stewart, I don't just listen to him. After I pick up some of the pointers, I then hit the good old intertubes, the internet, of course, and do my own research, and that's where I use Jon Stewart as a lead-in to learn and as a lead-in to bring further information, and that's what I did. Looked at I went and researched all these issues that he brought up and found out, oh my God, all of this is so true. It's not new, the mistreatment that we're giving our veterans. So I'm going to ask you guys to go ahead and read some of those blogs. I posted them at the Coffee Party page. And when you get to the Coffee Party page, folks, remember to like the page. We are on the move. Coffee Party is beginning a process of getting out there and doing what it was intended to do for some time. So let's all get with the program. Let's all move on. Well, anyhow, the traditional media midterm narrative is falling apart. The traditional media narrative for the midterm election is that the president is unpopular. They say Obamacare will be an anchor on Democrats' chances for holding on to the Senate. They say it is going to be a great election for Republicans. No one speaks about whether it is going to be a great midterm for America. It is as if every day Americans have nothing to do with the outcome of the elections they will be participating in. Americans are not yet fully engaged in the midterm elections. They're busy. Those in the traditional media, they have real issues to deal with to survive. Ironically, when one polls the landscape, the traditional media's narrative is turning on its head. Unfortunately, as opposed to correcting for actual observations, the traditional media digs in. This is dangerous because the media at some level has the ability to distort reality, and as such, it can change electoral outcomes. So that's what we're going to talk about. And in that light, my blog post on the Daily Kos this week, which will be dropped at 8 p.m. Central Standard Time tomorrow on the front page. I hope you go ahead and read it. I hope you comment on it. I hope you lead people to it, and I hope you also lead people to view it when we get it placed at Coffee Party USA. Well, this one probably won't make it to Coffee Party USA because this one I think may be a bit too partisan for Coffee Party USA. And as you know, our goal is intended to have everyone speaking to come up with common ground. But anyhow, here it goes. A democracy requires a free, independent press. Before I go there, I want to remind you that this is a call-in show. The number is 646-929-2495. Again, that number is 646-929-2495. And I want to hear from you. No matter what you want to talk about, whether you twist our subject a bit, it doesn't matter. Give us a call. This is your show. Remember that. This is your show. This will always be your show. We serve. Anyhow, title, are the traditional media oblivious to the midterm narrative that is falling apart? A democracy requires a free, independent press. The First Amendment of the Constitution codifies that right. Fortunately, while the press represented by the traditional media has the right to be free, it has chosen indentured servitude to the American plutocracy. There are several dangers to this eventuality. Specifically, the traditional media has become the arm used to manufacture or hide real news. I digress out of my piece for a change because I have been hard on the traditional media for putting out false information. But let me be frank, folks. It's not only the traditional media that puts out false information. It is some independent medias whose goal it is as well to put out false information. So what I'm saying is while we need to remove our reliance on the traditional media with the expectation of getting true and real information, we must also be cognizant of those who would use these resources now open to everybody, that being the internet or otherwise, to promote fallacies that hurt the public at large and specifically that hurt individuals. But anyhow, moving on. Many times, It creates the path that makes the desired policy outcome of the plutocracy tomorrow's reality. The midterm narrative is that the party, and by the way, I see 2 calls waiting. I'm coming to you guys, so stay with me. The midterm narrative is that the party in the 6th year of an administration will take a beating at the polls. In other words, Democrats will lose the Senate, some House seats, and governorships, thus leaving an impotent president. Red states senators are supposed to take a beating because their constituents hate President Obama and his poll numbers are in the toilet. Well, near the toilet, they imply. Activists know that Americans are not dumb. Generally, many are just misinformed. Okay? Generally, most of them are just misinformed, and I just lost my place. But okay, there we go. Generally, most are misinformed. Eventually, however, many messes. McCarthyism was exposed. The false rationale for many prejudices was exposed. The false narrative for many of our wars was exposed. Many unreported realities are all around us, yet unreported by the traditional media in any substantive manner. How many realize that the Rasmussen Daily Tracking Poll, a conservative poll, has President Obama with a 50% approval rating? How many know that the Gallup poll's tracking poll is currently at 45%, but that he has been striking or skirting 50% at times? How many know that the 5 supposedly endangered red state Democratic senators are virtually even or leading in every race? Did you know that the governor's race in Georgia is very competitive? Did you know that the failure of the Republican governor to accept the Medicaid expansion to Obamacare could cost him that race? I'm speaking about in Georgia. The narrative is that Democratic voters fall off more than Republican voters in the midterms. Should it not have been news then that the virtually uncontested Democratic Senate race in Kentucky drew more votes than the contested Republican race? 400,000 plus versus 350,000 plus? The traditional media narrative on Republican governors gave the impression that their governance would propel them to the possibility of being president. How many know that where these governors have been able to institute their policies substantially, they have decimated their state's coffers? How many know that Governor Chris Christie is robbing pensions of those he extracted concessions from? He tries to blame others while refusing any increases in revenues. Kansas Governor Sam Brownback instituted standard Republican policies. He cut taxes, cut education budgets, and turned down the Medicaid expansion to Obamacare. He preached the same trickle-down nonsense that has never worked. States' revenue has dropped dramatically. How many know that he is now in a dead heat with his potential Democratic rival, Representative Paul Davis? Did you know that the media darling Wisconsin Governor Scott Walker's 7-point lead in the poll has vanished? He is now tied with his Democratic challenger, Mary Burke. Did you know that a general election beatable Chris McDaniel may beat incumbent Senator Thad Cochran in Mississippi? This puts a solid southern state in play. The traditional media has laid out a narrative. To most of them, reality does not matter. They fit everything into that narrative. They ignore what does not fit. The problem is that this behavior can promote self-fulfilling prophecies. If one believes the outcome is already baked, then why vote? It is that behavior that activists must mitigate. These narratives are not just journalistic heresy. They are intentional. Journalists are not dumb. They simply know who signs their checks. They know what is expected of them, and they oblige. The traditional media are not oblivious to their narrative falling apart. They are petrified that everyone else will realize it. It is for this reason they figuratively ask, Are you going to believe me, or are you going to believe your lying eyes? And with that, I bring in 210. I'm pretty sure this is my friend, John from San Antonio, my brother.
Yeah, good afternoon, Egberto. I'm going to have to shorten my stay a little bit. I'm going up to Austin to see a great jazz show tonight, so I'm going to enjoy that. But, I agree with what you...
for me out there, buddy.
All right.
You hear me?
Right.
All right.
Yeah. So I agree with most of what you're saying. This is kind of thrust upon the whole internet, and also in traditional media and on the cable channels, that the Democrats are in trouble, when actually it's been a toss of the coin for about the past 4 or 5 months, and if anything, within the past 3 weeks, the Democrats' chances have improved. If you look at the upshot, it was 59% that the Democrats were going to hold the Senate. Now it's gone back down to 56%. But I do truly believe that the Democrats will hold the Senate. And I agree with what you're saying. I don't know if it's necessarily as intentional as you say. I think the journalists are under pressure to have both sides, like Chuck Todd the other night. I mean, I really like his horse race analysis, but he was talking about races in Iowa where, like, the upshot has the Bruce Braley up probably from Joni Ernst is probably going to win that, the castrating lady. She's probably going to, the chances of winning are 82%. And he was talking about Colorado also. The upshot has Mr. Udall up. The odds are 61%. So now, if you look at the Washington Post polls, they are just the opposite. They have a 75% chance that the Republicans are going to win the Senate, and they're really incredibly off on a lot of different races, like the Michigan race. They have the Iowa race as being a toss-up, a 50-50 race. And so, I think you see that more so in the Washington Post polling, and this meme that came about, the Democrats are gonna lose the Senate. And you hear that all around. I mean, even from really hardcore progressives. And I have to admit, I've even talked about it on your show. I've just mentioned it briefly. But I mean, because this is something to ponder, because we have to think about, well, what will happen if we do lose the Senate, and what we should do is use that for motivation to get out and vote, and that's the most important thing, is to motivate people to vote. I know I've voted, I guess. On Tuesday, this will be my 5th time I voted since the new laws came here in Texas, where you have to show your ID. And every time I vote, it drives me crazy that I have to show an ID. And I hope in September, when this goes before the court, that's going to get overturned, just like it was overturned in Wisconsin and all kinds of other states. So we'll have people who can't afford ID and aren't able to get ID, who've been voting all these years and are actually able to vote. So that's really important. But I do think that it's really important that people do follow. I know what you're saying. People they're busy with their lives, but this will have a huge impact on their lives. Who is in office. And I love to talk about policy, but the horse race is interesting too, because I mean that's sociology, and that's why people believe what they believe, and what are people motivated by. And so that's very interesting to me. So I'll go ahead.
You're always absolutely correct, John. I concur. Now, when it comes to people being busy, I always recall a little skit that was done by Ashley Sanders at Move to Amend, And what she did is she ran around. They actually built a cart that somebody could pull on with a bike. And what they did is it was actually a show to show people why we needed to engage politically, why we couldn't allow money to be called speech, and why we had to ensure that corporations weren't people. They gave a skit. But within that skit was another message, and that was the powers that be keep you entertained and slightly fed just enough so that you're semi-happy, you're semi-hungry to know that you can't just go fight the powers. You have to keep getting enough to feed yourself. And, you know, in a lot of ways, that's the state that Americans are in now. So, I mean, I have started, you know, there was a time I was really hard on us all by saying, it is our fault, we allowed these things to happen. And then, you know, I started to get more empathetic and say that, and I think you see that in my narrative here, where I say people are busy, people are, you know, you and I scour the internet, and many of our coffee party members, they scour the internet and they try to stay informed and they try to exchange ideas, but the vast majority of folks aren't there. You know, the vast majority of folks don't know anything about politics. They're just trying to survive. So we have to find a way to break in. And I think with what we're doing here, with what you're doing, with what all of us are doing, you know, that's what we're trying to do. Because, you know, at least everybody's on Facebook, and if they see a thread that tickles their fancy, in other words, I think I was mentioning earlier how I use the Jon Stewart pieces, and that is, while a lot of people don't like politics, a lot of people like comedy, a lot of people like Jon Stewart, and when they want that comedic relief, if they see a Jon Stewart picture, they may click on that guy. But if they see a picture that says Obama wants to increase something for scholarships, that is something they should read, they may not. But if a picture of Jon Stewart comes out there talking about, check this out about education that makes it funny, hey, I can use that to bring them in and then give them the same piece of information. So there are a lot of ingenious ways now that activists have to use to do exactly what you're saying we need to do. What would it be like? We can't posit the question, what would it be if the Republicans take over? A lot of people don't quite, that isn't sexy enough for them a lot of times. We're talking about that at our convention in San Francisco last week as well, where we're saying, you know, a lot of people are just not connecting with the messages as they used to before. They need a little bit more. And I think that's what all of us together have to find a way of doing, coming together and getting that message out. Now, when it comes to the traditional media and what the traditional media is doing to our body politic, though, you say that you don't think it is quite intentional. I did a piece on Chuck Todd when that guy who wrote the book that said one party had more blame in this gridlock than the other. Bernstein, I think, is the guy who wrote the book. Olstein, I don't remember his name. Anyway, he wrote the book that said that the blame should not be considered equal. And it was amazing listening to Chuck Todd, because Chuck Todd realized that the alternate media was on his back. He said that we are trying to make them, meaning Chuck Todd and the big shots, irrelevant. And he said he realized it, and the way we promote the news, that's what we're trying to do. If I could talk directly to Chuck Todd, I would tell him, yeah, that's what we're trying to do. And the reason we're trying to do that is that they have made themselves irrelevant. They have allowed the false narrative to go forward. They have allowed the less than informed American populace that we have right now. So yeah, that's what we're trying to do. Go ahead, John, and then I'll get to the next caller.
No, I agree with that. I mean, obviously we've had differences in arguments. I mean, I think that there's a lot of bad journalists out there, but I think that at the same time, you know, what a lot of them are looking at is they're looking at people. Will Democrats show up at the polls? I mean, you look at the races in Kentucky and in Georgia, and so much of it is just going to rely on turnout. I mean, in all the real competitive races in Alaska and in North Carolina and in Arkansas. Well, Arkansas, the polling is really going Pryor's way, and that's great because Pryor is really pushing, saying that the Republicans are really how they want to cut the social safety net. And so he has also the advantage that Medicaid expansion was really successful in Arkansas, and also in Kentucky it was really successful. So I think that's really helped Democrats. And did you hear what McConnell said yesterday? McConnell said
Can you believe that?
that the Connect, which is, obviously the part of the Affordable Care Act, but they call it Connect, is different from Obamacare, which is just so patently false that, I mean, everybody.
But here, John, that is what John, I don't mean to interrupt you here, but this is what I'm talking about here. That is a huge story. The leader of the Republican Party is stating, goes out and he blatantly lies to his populace. He blatantly lies. That is like President Obama coming out and blatantly lying about something. If you remember, the president lie, if you will, about you can keep your insurance wasn't really a lie. It was a nuanced situation because he didn't cut the people's policies. The insurance companies did. But this man, McConnell, blatantly lied. The Obama story was on for weeks. This story is, it is something that I was going to write about last night. I wanted to instead do the Jon Stewart piece. I'm still probably going to write about it later on today. But it's a piece that got so little coverage. The only people really covering it is, guess who? Daily Kos. Liberal America. Those are the places covering it.
I think the Huffington Post is covering it too. But it happened on a Friday. The Friday's always kind of the news dump day. But hopefully it will get traction, and as the holiday weekend goes over, people will start calling him out on it because it's just unbelievable what a lie it is. But he really wants to try to take advantage of the fact that, Obama is not popular in his state, but he himself is not popular. They're right about the same approval rating, right in the low 30s. And so,
Obama is slightly above him.
Yeah. So, I wish Allison Lundergan Grimes would be a little bit more receptive to some, traditional Democratic values. She's trying to be, completely independent, and I understand that that's what she feels that she needs to do in her state. But, at the same time, you look at Begich, you look at Hagan.
She has to do that. Yeah.
Well, yeah, maybe so. But, a lot of people would disagree. Bill Clinton would disagree. Like I said, Begich and Hagan and Pryor and Landrieu are all running on the ACA and all running on and talking about Medicaid expansion and talking about how the Republicans want to cut the social safety net. And the cutting the social safety net is a major issue in Arkansas. Pryor has just been pounding Tom Cotton with this, and he's developed a pretty good lead. Just consistent lead in polls. Yes. He's had 3 polls where he's up by 10 points, and it's been phenomenal. Again, this isn't my idea of a progressive, but this is where the country's at right now. It's going to take slow movement, and I just hope that. Things, that somehow the Democrats can hold on. And like I say, I do think they are. I do think it's going to happen. It's 5.5 months away, but I do think they're going to hold on.
I think they're going to hold on, but it is interesting because you said something that is very important, and that is you have to meet people where they are. One of the reasons I said Lundergan has to do the way she's doing it is that she has to meet those people where they are. And where they are is still in that indoctrinated phase where anything Obama is bad. In fact, I think the Democratic governor of Arkansas was so smart when he called his Obamacare Connect, because he allowed himself to sell Connect away from that Obama presidency, so that now that the elections come around, somebody can actually make the case, hey, guess what? That thing that you love is what the other side was actually lying about, and guess what? You love it. Now in Kentucky, Lundergram said the same thing, but she said it a bit differently. She actually came out and said she's not for repealing this thing. She wants to fix it because her first goal is her first loyalty is neither to Obama, Hillary, or to the individuals in the Senate, but it is to her state. I thought her speech was very good. I thought that she's getting better at looking stronger. I mean, she's a young person, 34, 35 years old, I believe, going up against the most expert politician in the country. And I think she's holding her own very well. I think she comes across as knowledgeable. And you know what is the other thing? I want to see women take over more than 51% of this darn the governorship. I mean, the governance of this country, because as we know, men have done a lousy job so far. And people may say, well, we shouldn't look at this from a gender perspective. I'm sorry. Reality tells me maybe it's time to do so. But stay with me, John. Let me get to 620 real quick. 620. This sounds like this is Jack.
Okay,
hey, Jack.
Okay,
what's up, buddy?
Jack Golding.
Talk to me, Jack.
It's Jack Golding. Okay. It's Allison Wonderson Grimes, whatever her name is, Grimes, is going to win. I predict that. Because...
Good prediction.
Because the McConnell is so unpopular in Kentucky. And I think that some of the ones who voted for the other schmuck, what's his name? Forget his name.
I know who you.
What? Yeah,
McConnell.
I think they're going to vote. They're going to vote Democrat. And I don't think. I hope. There's dire predictions that the Republicans are going to take over the Senate. But I'm hoping that's not true. I don't know where to get their statistics, where to get those polls.
Well, as I was talking to John before, it's not that
right.
They create a narrative, Jack. There's a narrative that the media creates, and this is why I find our news media sad, because they create a narrative. Look how difficult it was, John. I remember you mentioning about Chris Christie quite a few weeks before, saying that there's no way that he's going to come back or whatever because he was so damaged in what he was doing. And for the longest time, the mainstream, or I don't like to call them mainstream, we are now the mainstream media, but the traditional media has stayed with that story, somehow propping him up, trying to disregard all the things that make him very difficult. But Jack, stay with me. Let me bring in 412. 412, who do I have the honor of speaking with?
Hi, Egberto. It's Greg Russack. How are you?
Hey, Greg, talk to me, my friend.
I thought I would just maybe add a little to the conversation in terms of what drives the media, the traditional media.
I was going to say another thing.
Go ahead, Greg. And then I'll come back to you, Jack.
The traditional media has a revenue model that's built around advertisement, I'm sure as everybody knows, and that advertisement relies on bringing people in and keeping them and their attention. And so it benefits them to obviously be as sensational as possible, because facts can get a little dull, they can get a little boring, and we have plenty of examples every day around the kinds of stories, quote unquote, that traditional media will feed to their audiences in an attempt to make sure that stories don't die, and the ones that really need to be talked about, which, again, aren't as sensational, aren't as exciting, don't get a lot of attention simply because it doesn't sell soap. There's there's a recognition and awareness, I think, that, at least I'd like to hope so anyway, that more and more people are coming to about the fact that you cannot necessarily trust what mainstream media tells you, certain outlets more so than others, because it's not the same everywhere. But there are similarities, of course. MSNBC needs to sell soap, just like Fox News. And that's really all I wanted to contribute to the discussion, and that is that, before you pretend as a viewer or listener or reader that what you're getting is an unbiased accounting of something, you have to account for the fact that there are now fewer and fewer sources, actually, of information. News companies and even organizations like National Public Radio cannot afford to keep bureaus open everywhere. So they rely on themselves. They cite each other as sources. And they make sure that the story is going to, have sizzle. Maybe not a lot of steak, but a lot of sizzle. And that way you'll come back for more. And you'll start to believe, actually, what you're reading or hearing or listening as if it were fact. That was really all I had to say.
Greg, actually, I think that is an excellent observation, and I think as aggregator like Huffington Post is a classic example, okay? And believe it or not, I think while Huffington Post is a great example of that, I think what we have to realize is that the general population now is programmed for that kind of sazzle, or I don't remember the word that you used, to bring them into the story, right? In other words, if you look at a lot of what Huffington Post has now, and it's a proven thing because I write for a particular organization, and I'm not talking about the main one, Daily Kos, that one time came up and told me, when we're writing, we should have things like the 10 best reasons for X, Y, Z, or the 10 best reasons for that. And I replied to, why would we want to do that? And they said, well, because that is the only way to get folks in. And I wrote, I guess, a couple of articles where I wrote the article first, and then I looked in the article to see if I could break it into a narrative that said the 10 best X, Y, Z. After doing that 2 times, I said to myself, I would only do that if there is a reason to do that, but not for the case of the other words, because I can otherwise use other venues to get what I want. As an example, I think I mentioned earlier, Jon Stewart is a great way to. Jon Stewart is a comedian, but he's a different kind of comedian because he researches information and he tells it in a comedic fashion. I remember the first time that I made a post with Jon Stewart, I got excoriated. You're supposed to be serious news. Why are you going to a comedy channel? Did a quick example. Compare what was shown on NBC or CBS, ABC on the main news, on that half-hour news, and then compare what you saw that same day on the Daily Show, and also look at the in-depth analysis that went into it. I think that particular time I was talking about expanding Medicare, and he did a very, very funny skit about it, but it was pretty fact-based, and it actually showed how silly it was that the mainstream media was spending the time to listen to all these stories that could easily be refuted and giving them time, which meant they had some plausibility. That is where we are at today, where you have to know your audience, cater to them, bring them in, but is what do you do with them after you have the audience? If you're an activist, you have to follow this type of pattern so that you can actually bring that, you can first get that person into your office where you can say, okay, here's a joke, but let me get serious now. Did you know that you can make a difference? And I tell you, it's an experiment, or I shouldn't say it's an experiment. It's a trial and error thing that activists are learning. We have, when we go to Netroots, which I'm going to in Detroit next month, when we or the beginning of July, I believe, when we get into these different organizations, they teach you methods that activists can use to break the morass that these supposedly mainstream media have created. Let's see. Go ahead, Greg. Answer that if you want to, and I want to get somebody else in.
Yeah, I follow what you're saying, and I don't disagree with it completely. That in some way, because there's so many endless possibilities for people to be able to get information, because people tend to lean in towards those sources that reinforce and bolster their position and their opinions, that once you've got someone's attention, it can be difficult for somebody else to get it, I guess, maybe, and that you have to find a way to break through in very short order in order to get people's attention. And I completely agree with that idea from an activism kind of strategy, that in any organization needs to get people engaged and activated around a cause, need to understand that they can't wait to do that, that you have to be very succinct, you have to be very clear about what it is that you hope to accomplish and what kind of people you need to help you to do it. And so, yes, I completely agree with what you were saying in that regard. When it comes to the media, though, this is where I would make the distinction, is when it comes to the media, I just feel like after 50-plus years, I no longer have a fourth estate that actually watches out for my back and for your back and everybody else's back. It just doesn't feel like that anymore. And so much of what we see today in traditional media reinforces that cynicism, for me at least, and that is that the story, the quote-unquote story that gets people's attention is that the Democrats might lose the Senate. Whether that happens or not, it seems to be secondary in terms of the story. And that's true for lots and lots of subjects. Could be about NSA spying. Could be about Benghazi. Could be about all kinds of things that actually are more about the sizzle instead of the steak.
You know what? That last two sentences that you said, Greg, I think is the very, very most important. A lot of times, the headline is what shouldn't really be the headline. I can tell you personally, and from blogging myself, a lot of my headlines are not really what is important at all. Yes, you and I know better. John knows better, but we do what we're doing. We're doing the job the best we can. And other than the best we can, we learn from the mistakes that we make in the process of doing so. But that's I think, the difference between us and even the mainstream media. It seems like nothing phases them anymore. Now, folks, please remember the number is 646-929-2495. Again, that number is 646-929-2495. Press 1 if you'd like to say something. And let's see, John, do you want to add anything else? I know you said you had to leave early.
Yeah, I'll just say that one good thing that's happening, though, and I think Nate Silver has really been at the forefront of this, first starting when he was blogging under the name Poblano in 2008 at Daily Kos, is he has really made the art of predicting much more precise, and his record speaks for itself. He predicted every, Senate race right, and including the Heidi Heitkamp race, which was really hard to pick. And so,
that's amazing.
What he does, and he had he only had one thing at 5:38 in March, which has only been 2 months ago. And so I'm really hoping he's going to start, really getting these detailed analysis, looking at each poll, evaluating how good the poll is, evaluating all the crosstabs, and really going in putting a number on that, just like he did in 2012. And so, there really is a lot of information out there, and it really has become much more precise than just looking, like let's say at Charlie Cook or Roth or Sabato, who were the three traditional guys before Nate came around. And the upshot now on the New York Times is basically put up to compete with Nate, and they've done a good job. I have to say, I think the upshot has been excellent, and I recommend people to go there to look at that. And one thing about, as far as, I agree with what Greg is saying about the sizzle, but one thing you do have to think about is, what will happen, and use that as a motivating factor. One thing, I think Obama will be able to veto almost everything, if the Republicans win and then they eliminate the filibuster, which I think they will because they're just so hungry for power. And what they've done in the past, considering debt ceiling votes, they're just so incredibly extreme. And I don't think the population understands how extreme they are. But one of the negative things that Obama would probably put into place would be the TPP, because this is the one issue that he agrees with the Republicans on. So, I think that progressives should be motivating people to say, Obama, he agrees with the TPP. The Republicans agree with the TPP. So, this is a motivating factor. Let's not have the TPP come into place.
You know something, John? I had never thought about that angle before. That actually the TPP wins because the executive and the Congress would then finally be in sync. Wow. I had never thought about, with all this stuff, with all this fighting against the TPP, I had never thought about, well, yes, my contention was we had to convince the president against the TPP, but with the backing of a Republican Senate, he just may use that as a bargaining chip, and we don't want the TPP to be a bargaining chip. We simply want the TPP gone.
That's right. All right, I got to go, but it's a great show, and I'm looking forward to your show on KPFT on Sunday night, 9 p.m. Central. Right, Monday night, 9 p.m. Central, KPFT. Do you have any guests scheduled, or what's the theme of your show?
Last week we had a great guest on the author of Loathing Lincoln. This week I'm going solo. I am actually going to be talking about veterans, only veterans. It's Memorial Day, so I figured I better do veterans and kind of enlighten folks about it, talk a little bit about all the things that they've gone through, and start to entertain a conversation as far as what we should do as a people to our veterans, because for years we've treated them like much less than.
Yeah, and I'll be talking about the Bernie Sanders bill that he wanted to introduce in February, which the Republicans rejected, and that to help give more money to the veterans. The veterans need more money, and they need this is part of tax phobia that I talk about. I mean, we've got to get over this. We've got to understand that, we've sent these people to war. They're coming back in incredible numbers. We did increase the budget, but we need to increase it more to take care of these people that are suffering. So I'm looking forward to that show. Before you go, I just want to it's going to be good. I just want to give you a number, because the number everybody run away and says, but we increased the budget by 50%. But we put 150% plus burden on that 50% we increase. So, those are kind of the things that we talk about. But look, thank you, John, and you enjoy Austin. I haven't been to Austin in a couple months since we had that big rally out there, but we'll be rallying again. So whenever I'm out there, I'd let you know, my friend. You have a safe trip over there. It's only an hour from where you're at, so have fun. All right, thank you.
Take care, buddy. Now, Greg, actually, I think Jack wanted to speak again. Jack, were you wanting to say something again?
No, yeah.
Okay, you're hot.
I don't have as much respect for the New York Times. This wasn't discussed enough. There's a lawyer named Nellie Abramson
she got
fired by because her opinion is different. They went to speak in front of a college, and she was great. Students considered her great. Number two is something that hasn't been discussed at IRS. Should get out of the 504C business.
It's another subject, but that is so true. I mean, that's an important subject that a lot of people don't realize.
To end a lot of the corruption.
Absolutely.
The Koch brothers and crap like that. Yeah. Should push on that.
Before you go, Jack, enlighten people about something. I want to enlighten people about that. We could solve the problem if we simply abide by the law that says these organizations are for educational purposes only and cannot engage in political activity. It is that simple, but we said
there's a matter of two words.
Right, exactly.
Probably or something like that. It's probably true or definitely true. I forget. It's not that's the words that just came to mind. Exclusively and probably,
right.
Yeah, that's way back in 1959. They made that law, and this is interpreted as exclusively, and then this whole business will be. The definition is never a fact. It's always a matter of opinion. I want to put my 2 cents in there.
Right. Now, I want to get some words in here. At the end of the show, I always forget to tell folks about our other radio show. So since we're coming close to the close of the show, I think I better do it now. So I want to remind our people, and we'll get back in a little bit more, that Coffee Party Radio has 4 shows. The 4 shows are as follows. On Sundays at 3 p.m. Eastern, we have Progressive Politics Tennessee Style with Bud Fields. Anybody who listens to Bud knows Bud is a very empathetic and very passionate activist. We also have on Mondays at 10 p.m. Eastern, Press 1 for Democracy with Dan Aronson. Dan is also one of our board members and one of our he's a very devout Coffee Party member. And of course on Thursdays at 3 p.m. we have Lunch with Loudon. Janine Loudon is our executive director and a board member, and every Thursday, no matter what, she makes sure that Coffee Party members has a show to listen to, Lunch with Loudon, Thursdays at 3 p.m. Eastern. And, of course, here on Saturdays at 12 p.m. Central, 1 p.m. Eastern, you have Politics Done Right with Egberto Willies. We're here, folks, to serve. Now, the president went to I guess it's a fundraiser yesterday, and we're talking about how the media is and how they report. And he had one interesting thing to say, and I want to read it. It's about 4 paragraphs, and it should go rather quickly because it's important. And it says, "You'll hear if you watch the nightly news or you read the newspaper that, well, there's gridlock. Congress is broken. Approval ratings for Congress are terrible. And there's a tendency to say a plague on both your houses. But the truth of the matter is that the problem in Congress is very specific. We have a group of folks in the Republican Party who have taken over, who are so ideologically rigid, who are so committed to an economic theory that says it's folks at the top. If folks at the top do very well, then everybody else is somehow going to do well, who deny the science of climate change, who don't think making investments in early childhood education makes sense, who have repeatedly blocked raising a minimum wage. So if you work full time in this country, you're not living in poverty, who scoff at the notion that we might have a problem with women not getting paid for doing the same work that men are doing. They, so far at least, have refused to budge on bipartisan legislation to fix our immigration system, despite the fact that every economist who's looked at it says it's going to improve our economy, cut our deficits, help spawn entrepreneurship and alleviate great pain for millions of Americans all across the country. So the problem is not that the Democrats are overly ideological, because the truth of the matter is that Democrats in Congress have consistently been willing to compromise, which is what we believe in, compromise and reach out to the other side. There are no radical proposals coming out from the left. When we talk about climate change, we talk about how do we incentivize through the market great investment in clean energy. When we talk about immigration reform, there's no wild-eyed romanticism. When we say they're going to be tough on the borders, but let's also make sure the system works to allow families to stay together. When we talk about taxes, we don't say we're going to have rates in the 70% or 90% when it comes to income like existed here 50 or 60 years ago. We say let's just make sure that those of us who have been incredibly blessed by this country are given back to kids so that they are getting a good start in life, so that they get early childhood education, health care. We didn't suddenly impose some wild, crazy system. All we said was, let's make sure everybody has insurance. And this made the other side go nuts. The simple idea that in the wealthiest nation on earth, nobody should go bankrupt because somebody in their family gets sick working within a private system. So when you hear a false equivalence that somehow, well, Congress is just broken, it's not true. What's broken right now is a Republican Party that repeatedly says no to proven time-tested strategies to grow the economy, create more jobs, ensure fairness upon opportunity to all people. Why did I read that? Folks, we all must get along together. We're all culturally from one party or another, or we all have all the things that we believe in. However, it does no good to our body politic if we don't call a spade, if we don't let problems lie, if we don't apply the disinfectant to it. Light is the best disinfectant. Bringing the truth out is the best disinfectant. We have to do that. All those things that the president mentioned in that piece affects human beings. And it doesn't only affect human beings for the 4 years that any particular president is in office, or 8 years, any particular president in office, or 2 years for congressman or whatever. Failures that we effect on people today can affect them throughout the rest of their lives. The lack of education that we are providing to our kids today because of a false austerity, it doesn't only affect our country today. It doesn't only give us problems today. It doesn't only hurt us today. It affects us materially for a generation. So it is incumbent on us as Americans to be honest, to be wide-eyed, to be civil in our critiques, to realize that there are many of those out there who don't necessarily agree with their party, but are scared to come out against because of peer pressure, because of other loyalties. We must give them the space, but we must not step back. We must give people the space that they need to do what they need to do for their families, their country, whatever. But we, as enlightened people, should never, ever step back. With that, I'm going to ask Jack for a quick closing statement. And Jack, you got 10 seconds. Jack, come on in.
Okay. Let's say the two things I mentioned was you got to be skeptical about what Palin calls the lamestream media.
Amen. And I got to stop you there, Jack. I'm sorry because I got 20 seconds.
Number two, focus on tax reform.
Thank you, sir. Okay, Greg, give me a quick 10 seconds, Greg.
I just want to say I completely agree with that closing remarks that you made there, Egberto. They continue to pretend that every ideology or party is equally to blame for our problems. It's silly, naive, immature, and uninformed. Thanks.
Thank you very much, Greg. Folks, this is Politics Done Right. I'm Egberto Willies, your host. Thank you very much for listening to me for 1 hour, and we will be back next week. You guys have a wonderful, wonderful weekend and enjoy your holiday.